2020 crowned the media and journalists who have consistently strengthened ways of presenting facts through data analysis and data visualization, specifically within the last decade. But sadly, 2020 and the pandemic also exposed the weakness of news approaches produced by journalists that had underestimated data analysis before COVID-19. And same happened with media that had suppressed data and visualization teams in recent years. I speak particularly in Latin America. Considering those differences, I think that data journalism became mainstream in those media outlets that have long since understood that good visuals information is rewarded by the audience and also is profitable, what all the media is looking for. So I think there are many good examples of outstanding data visualization and data journalism. And for example, I can show you, I would like to show you some of those that I consider are on the top or in my top. For example, this one from El País in Spain, a lunch, a bar, in a class. This is how the coronavirus spreads in the air. I think there's a high probability that all of you have seen this piece because it was read by more than 12 million people. And that is the reason because it was translated into English, Portuguese, and even Chinese. What we have here is information of universal convenience, helping to understand how we can prevent contagions of COVID. And this is an outstanding the data visualization, explanations, illustrations, and animations that are crucial to understand the situation of how the virus multiplies, or how can we reduce the probability of a contagious. And another one great example, talking about flattening the curve, as you said, is this one from Washington Post. And it was published last March when we were in the middle of uncertainty, and there were many definitions, epidemiology definitions saying flatten the curve. What is that? Everyone wants to understand exactly what was that exponential curve about. So I think this is one of the projects which I really learned a lot, and it also was a milestone for the Washington Post. It was translated into 14 languages, and yes, this is one of the mainstream pieces of the last year. And one of my favorites absolutely is this from Financial Times, who really opened my eyes in the need of using, on the relevance of using a logarithmic scale instead of a linear one, just for being more precise, to do more precise comparisons of growth rates of infections among countries. It also, I think it was fundamental for data journalists to understand indicators such as excess deaths, for example, and the importance of review data from death certificates, etc. So this is a great project, one of my favorites. And this one from New York Times, sorry. It's I think its value is that humanize the victims' data at a time when numbers were at risk of losing meaning for people. So it shows that it was people, not statistics, who died. And I can give you more examples of important or very good examples of data journalism. But I think those are great pieces of of data journalism that demonstrates the fundamental impact of data visualization was exactly to help us understand and give us useful answers in the midst of the uncertainty of the pandemic.
For sure, and yet they're amazing ones. And I think that at this point that you brought the impact one, I'd like to link it because, of course, we had the health impact, of course, it's a pandemic, but we also had and still have and trying to understand what will be the economic impact. And for this, we do have here the person from the economic side, that is Valentina. And Valentina, you worked in a very interesting article that was related exactly to it, right? That was about how the urban centers, they've been affected by the pandemic. And we'd like to explore a little bit because it's quite interesting. I think that when everything started, it took some time for us to understand how it was changing also the urban centers. Because if we think about, I don't know, if you think about the city of London, people would go there to work and then suddenly we're all at home. We're not doing it anymore, right? We're not going to offices, we're not consuming near the offices. So it's impacting a lot of things. So could you talk a little bit about how did you come up with the idea for the article? And also, yeah, show to everyone a bit what the article is about and what you did.
Yes, I have to say that I was involved also in the other graphic that Hassel showed, and I think for sure the pandemic at the beginning and mostly has been focused on data journalism on tracking the death, the vaccination, the infections, and this has been part of my role as well, especially in showing the relevant measure, because with so much data availability, it can be confusing. But at some point, there has been another more silent revolution, I think, in terms of data affected by the pandemic. And I think it's related that with the fact that the pandemic has made standard economic data useless, basically, or even unreliable. So all of a sudden, people working in data journalism, economic data journalism, had a problem to invent, source, or create alternative measure of economic performance. And this is related to the long read that I've done in Urban Center, because it uses one of these indicators. So basically, we looked at measures such as how many trucks are traveling on the roads, how many flights, how many people are moving around. In this case, and I'm going to show the screen now, we looked, I hope everybody can see it. We use an indicator from the Google Mobility Report, which tracks visits to certain locations. And we use the visit to entertainment and retail hubs. So how many people goes to places like restaurants, bars, shops, and so on. And this has become kind of the main measure for consumption. I mean, measure of household consumption are published for like 2 months after, with a delay of 2 to 3 months, which means they are useless to policymakers. Like the Bank of England now look at the Google Mobility Report because that's the more timely measure in order to decide what to do in terms of interest rates. And this is a dramatic revolution for economic data and has been challenging for people working with economic data. In this particular case, when Google started to not only publish data at a national level, but also at the local level, I thought it was a great opportunity to look at at the different impact within the country of the pandemic and of the restriction, and particularly at urban centers. I mean, there was evidence for people that lived near urban centers, that the centers, particularly business district, were emptied, largely because they are composed of professional services staff that could easily work from home. But this analysis showed the first strong evidence of that change, and we looked at urban centers across the world, because the Google Mobility data covers most of the world, but not China. And we found that this is a pattern consistent across the world. And so we've done an analysis with maps by for the major city, and then looked at comparison in various countries. And the pattern is quite clear. Whereas you have a city center, which is the blue line, as always underperformed the national average. This is the line shows the difference with the baseline. So how many visits to restaurants and bars compared to pre-pandemic levels. So a lower level indicates that there's been a greater impact. And so this is not the best graphic from the visualization point of view. It's not interactive. At the end of the day, you could argue it's simply line charts, but I think has the benefit of having a clear message that is clearly displayed. And I think in the newsroom, this is particularly important. Sometimes, and I think I will go back to that if there is time, there is a tension between the data visualization people and the editors, exactly in terms of how the message and how strong is the message of the data visualization.
That's an interesting point. I'll take a note here, and I hope that we have time to go back, because I quite like it. I came from newsrooms one day also. I will go now to Tara and a bit back to, because we saw now charts that I think that they are standard, and we've seen them for a long time in news. Now I think that we start to see them more and more and more. But there is also one thing that in the past year is specifically, and in the COVID coverage, we saw other elements from the data visual part. That is, for instance, I guess that a good example that is Hassel brought it. That is this one from El País, where they did this 3D model showing the impact of, for instance, opening a window or wearing a mask, how it kind of impacts in the transmission. And Tara, as you're the person here on the table, I think that the one that works more with the visual part, right? That's where you came from. Do you think that, especially because we were in a very atypical year also in terms of image, right? Because, well, you're as a data journalist, as a photojournalist, sorry, you know that usually when you have news, the first thing that they say is, well, go to the street, take a photo and bring back something to illustrate it. But basically we were all locked at home. The streets were empty. We were talking about a virus, so there is not much to see, right? Do you think that those elements that the data journalism offers, do you think that they help it to bring some understanding and kind of a more live to the topic, to make it more alive, the topic?
I think data journalism in general, the strength is trying to show things that are hard to do, right? So with climate change and with other things that are not easy to portray visually, that data visualizations can really shine. But for sure, I mean, there are a lot of examples of amazing visuals that came out of like the empty streets or the hospitals. There are some really just like heart-wrenching photos that I've seen, videos, and people have done some amazing things from lockdown. So there's been a lot, people are being creative about it. I think the strength of this year, and especially when we're talking about COVID and data visualization, is that everyone in the world is experiencing this pandemic. There's not one person that is untouched by this global event. And so when people are paying more attention, then you can really use that and really show them things that they otherwise might have just skipped over. Like when it's harder for people, they don't want to read about climate change, it's too depressing, but it's not something that affects them on a daily basis, perhaps. But now that we're all dealing with the pandemic, people are more likely to stay around and do it. The other thing is that because we're all having so much information, I think that it's also as visual people and for data visual people has to raise our level as well, because there's so much information out there that in order to keep people's attention, we also have to do something unique. And I loved the Alpais example. That is one of my favorites. And like Hassel said, it's been shared 12 million times for good reason. But I think then also there's other things that people are doing, like, for example, using data about when Valentina was saying about people's lives and the economic impact. And I just want to share one example that I found with there was can you guys see my screen? So this is from New York City Open Data. And it's about, you can use New York City's data and show different things you can use it for whatever you want. But one project was sidewalk widths, because in New York, a lot of sidewalks are not very large. And so if you're talking about trying to keep social distance, this is very helpful because they've used the data to show you how hard or easy it is to stay socially distant from people on different streets. So, and obviously color coded it for ones that are easier versus not, which is very interesting to me in terms of like taking a different approach to also using the, what we're going through, but also then showing how our daily lives and what we can use this to help us with our daily lives as we're all affected by this global pandemic. So I think that there's a lot of there's been a lot of innovation as well with this, where people realize that we have to keep showing different things in order to keep attention. And I really have enjoyed so many of the pieces as a result, from a journalist point of view and from a visual journalist point of view, in terms of how people are doing that.
Thank you. And this is an amazing example. I haven't seen this one, the one of the facts. Good one. And well, since we went to New York, let's stay in the US and then cover the other super big topic of 2020. That was the American elections. And just to let you know, we asked the panelists to kind of select some examples, so we know a bit what are the examples that they selected for us. And I know that Valentina brought a map, and maps and American elections. I think that for everyone that's been working in data for a while, in data visualization, you all know that always when there is an American election, there is a long discussion about the use of maps to show the electoral results in the US. And the example that Valentina brought, it's a quite nice one. It solves the eternal problem of big territories without a lot of people. So Valentina, if you could show us the example that you brought and tell a bit about what do you think that is stand out on this?
Yes, let me share it. I actually brought two examples for the American election. Elections are always a good source of data visualization because, like for the pandemic, there is a lot of attention and there is a lot of data. So two perfect ingredients for great pieces of data visualization. The US election went on for longer than expected and produced great pieces of data visualization and data journalism. One is the one that you sing is from Reuters, and I think this is just beautiful, nearly a piece of art, quite easy to understand with the peak that are proportionate to the gain compared to 2016. There is color coded, there is a map, so there is a lot of information there. It's a visual summary. And if you want to go into more details, you scroll down and it will show you some categories. For example, for suburban, it shows that there is a prevalence of gains for Biden. And if you, for example, for places where there is a prevalence of Black population, Trump has gained votes. Then there are other details, for example, the counties with the highest COVID deaths, or there was one with a prevalence of Hispanic population. So I think it's a good, it has so many positive things. He's granular, it's beautiful, and he has a lot of insight. But I need to show also something from the FT. We did many reporting, many graphical pieces, many pieces of data visualization on the US election. This is not as nearly as beautiful as the other one, but I think it has the benefit of using that granular information and making a summary ready for the reader. So it doesn't show you everything, but it does the analysis for you, and it tells you the main results, the main conclusion. And it tries to use simple graphics to show you that. I like particularly the last one, where it shows how the electorate in the US has become more polarized. And it compares with the early 1990s, where the majority of counties were voted in the majority of countries, people voted for both parties. In the last election, there was a very strong polarization with counties, a large proportion of counties that voted with the majority either for one or the other party. I guess what I'm trying to say here is that there are these are two very different types of data journalism and data visualization, but they have a purpose. The summary purpose of the FT graphic might be less beautiful, it definitely is, but as long as he has a message, I think it's a worthwhile piece of data journalism.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think that it's good to see variety, right? See different ways to not only cover the topics, but different ways to show the information, to display the information. I think that that is something that we discuss a lot inside data visualization, right? That that's not that there is a right and wrong. Of course, there are some things that are totally wrong and you won't understand anything. But in the well done side, there are quite different ways to show the same thing, right? That if you think about journalism in general, we always had, for instance, different ways, the same topic covered by radio, newspaper, magazine, or TV news, it would be different because the audience would be different, the idea would be different, right? The way that we'd like to reach them. So it's good to see that this richness is also coming into the data visualization, into the data side. And talking about richness and talking about variety, I would like to bring with Tara a topic that, it's in journalism, we wouldn't say that this is a hot topic because we tend to ignore that things that last for during a long period of time because we didn't manage to solve as humans. We don't consider them as hot topics. What I guess that it's a problem in the profession itself. But leaving a bit the hot topics according to journalism and going to the topics that have been for a while, I know that Taras brought some examples in climate change that I found them quite interesting. And I think that I'd like Tara to show and also to let us know if you think, Tara, that the way that they show the problem, because one of the issues that I think that we have when we're talking about climate change is that for a lot of people, despite of everything, it's still like a faraway topic. So people don't get that it is impacting their lives.
Right.
And the same way as COVID, I think that it's one of those topics that will impact everyone's life, right? So do you think that with the examples that you brought and with the use of data visualization, do you think that you're finally finding a way to prove people that, yes, you are impacted also?
Yeah, I think I think this is a good like gateway almost to like show people how things are affecting them and that climate change is the next thing on the agenda. But I think that with climate change and what I've found is that we have to be a little bit smarter about how we're telling it because I've heard this said before, and I'd like to find the person who said it because it's very smart. We're in the age of big data. We're also in the age of big anecdotes. So if we don't have the good stories to go with it that draw us in and make us feel personally attached to it, then we're going to find something else. There's just too much. And even though there is so much great data, we need to be able to attach the stories that connect with people in that way. So that I think that that's been a problem with a lot of climate change stories that I've seen is that it leaves people just feeling in despair, but it doesn't give them a way to kind of feel like, oh, this is something that affects me, or I can sort of feel interactive with the topic that will make me want to stay around longer and feel connected to it. So I just want to show you two different examples. One from Reuters about the world's biggest iceberg that's heads for disaster, which is a big iceberg that has detached A68A, which came loose in 2017. And what is very interesting about this is that they use a lot of really good graphics in different ways. They show the path on a map, and they also have, the actual, path that it's going by time-lapse images. And then here's where is that they are showing the iceberg, because if you look at that, you don't really know how that relates to anything. But here is a very simple graphic about how big the iceberg is in compared to cities. So it looks like it's almost the same size as Cape Verde. It's bigger than Singapore. It's it's bigger than Luxembourg. There's all these different things. So you can really see that this is in relation to something else. And I think that's really important, is to show comparisons with, especially with climate change, to understand how it actually relates to us. So the iceberg size is about the size of, it's a little bit smaller than Puerto Rico. In the US, it's larger than Jamaica. It's larger than Singapore. So that's a really that's a really helpful way to make this seem much more impactful to you, because we know those places and we understand them, as opposed to a nondescript iceberg. And there's some nice photos as well, which I think is great to show. But again, we wouldn't know how big that is in reference to other things. So it is showing how the path has gone and where it's gone, which is very interesting, and the timeline of it. And then it shows the impact on like where it's headed and what might happen to the population of penguins close to where the iceberg might end up. Because if the penguins can't get around this iceberg, they're going to die because they can't get the food. So it's really brings kind of the story in about the population. So that's one story that I think was really interesting and kind of like gave more of the story to it rather than just telling us the iceberg. A second one is about the Nile, which is something that's kind of close to my heart because I lived in Egypt for a while. And in Egypt, the Nile is obviously a very big deal. And recently, or rather in the last 10 years, Ethiopia has been starting to build the dam because it's not getting as much water from the Nile as Egypt. Egypt has had a lot more water per person, which kind of has been set up since colonial times. And this interactive from Al Jazeera is fantastic. It really goes through different ways to show, each country and how it's impacted by the Nile. So it gives a really good, very, very clear, easy breakdown of how many liters of water are, to be produced. And then it goes through, and it has a video attached to it. And then it has this amazing graphic about what happens if the dam is filled in 21 years and what's the result. And you can use this before and after slider to go through the artist rendering, which is great because you're interacting with the audience. The audience gets to really use this. It goes back and forth. It does it with 10. You can see, the 10 going back and forth. Again, how much of a difference it makes if the dam is filled in 10 years, how damaging that is. 7 years results in 30% loss of 3 million acres to Egypt's agriculture. If it's filled in 5 years, it's 50% loss. So you can really see a huge difference here before and after. So this would be after in terms of the green going away, which is quite different and damaging. And then finally 3 years. And then I also like this is that they give you sort of more about the Nile, and they do this nice little animation. They tell you that to show it to example with something you understand, like the Nile is longer than the distance between London and New York. That's a great way to kind of visualize how big this is. And why it makes it so special in terms of the rate of flow versus different other waters. So you can know like the Amazon or the Mississippi. And then, colonial treaties, why it is the way it is. And then I also there's a lot of great information. And it says, then at the end of each section, it asks you a question about yourself to see if you understand it. Is your country self-sufficient in water? So could you get away with just the water? So for Turkey, if I just choose where I am, which is in Turkey, and I say, is it self-sufficient in water? And I'm going to guess that it's 74% sufficient in water. And actually, Turkey is 98% self-sufficient in water, which is interesting. I didn't know that. But then you can really see how it is, in terms of like where they get, their water from and everything like this. So it's great because I think this is also, it's a very long thing. So then it goes to Ethiopia next. I'm not going to go through this entire thing with you, but it's well worth going through, and it's well worth spending the time with. And I think that's really the point, is that people can really feel connected to it because they understand how it relates to other things that they might know, even if they don't know the Nile personally. And then what a difference and an impact that's going to make. So those are two kind of examples of how climate change and why those are, to me, very good examples of data visualizations.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for sharing, Tara. We are heading to the final part of our roundtable. I will do one question to Hassel, and then I will get some of the questions that I can see that there are some in the chat. So before going to the chat, Hassel, I think that we saw some things here. For instance, you mentioned the question of the logarithmic scale. We saw in the examples a lot of maps that are gaining complexity. We saw a bit this thing of interacting with the visualization, so a bit of animation. We saw the 3D model. Do you think that we can talk about an increasing level of complexity of the visual part of data? Are we kind of having more complex data visualization offered together with the news?
I would say yes, but not specifically in technical terms, because I define the level of complexity as an increasing need to understand a topic deeply in order to transform it and to translate it into useful and precise knowledge to the audience. And I think that yes, that level of complexity is to place the technical tools or to make the technical tools work for a specific cause of give useful answers to the people. So I think this complexity sense, I insist, goes beyond the storytelling techniques or the modeling 3D or making GIFs, for example, or if you code in D3 or in R or in Python, or if you use Tableau or Data Wrapper or any other no-code online tools. I think this complexity is a state of quality by seeking that the information is truly at the service of people's needs. I think this is the holy grail, not only of data journalism, but of journalism as itself.
Perfect, thanks, Hassel. And we have some questions here in the chat. I will try to put them together because part of it, it's about the data, so where the data comes from. And specifically for Valentina, there is a question regarding the use of the data from Google. And the question is if you think that it can be kind of any type of concern if the data, major economic indicators start to come from a private company. So I think that we can start by Valentina, and then because there is this specific question about the data you showed, and then after Hassel and Tara, if you'd like to add about data source, where do you find them and which type of data usually you have contact with. So Valentina, if you could start.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. The Bank of England, like the ECB or policymakers around the world, it could be government, do not use only the Google mobility data. They look at a variety of indicators like we do at the Financial Times. They are considered as proxy for economic indicator because they are more timely. As I said, the standard economic data are published usually with a 2 months lag. So it's while it raises some questions, it's there is a large variety of indicators where that we track, and the number of indicator increases every day and changes. The reliability changes every day. For example, the Google mobility data, it was an extremely useful indicator at the beginning, but now consumers are changing habits. They are spending online, so the relationship between the Google mobility data and standard economic data is not as strong as at the beginning. So it's an evolution, a continuous evolution of economic data. Possibly the relationship is the opposite. The Bank of England used some data based on bank transaction, on which the Bank of England was reporting in its monetary policy reports, but the public and the Financial Times did not have access to this data. So the Financial Times wrote a column saying that this data should be available, and after a few months, in January, for the first time, the Bank of England with the ONS made this data available, and now I'm reporting on this data. It's a bank transaction figures that shows it's another alternative indicator for the health of the consumer sector. So the relationship, the use of data, its reliability, its importance as a leading economic indicator changes continuously, and I don't think there is no risk that policymaker will be dependent of one single private provider of economic data. We have seen lots of relationship building up between statistics office and private companies. For example, Azuna, which is an online job website, is feeding stats on its job advertisement on to the Office for National Statistics in the UK, has another alternative indicator of economic activity. The same does a Springboard, which is a tracker of retail. So as I said, there is a revolution in terms of economic data that has started with the pandemic, and I suspect it will not stop. I suspect we will not go back to having, the economic data 3 months old, of reporting data on such a long time.
Perfect, and thanks, Valentina. I think that we're super short in time, so Hassel and Tara, sorry, but I think that we need to finish. I'd like to thanks a lot you three. I could be here easily another hour, and I think that lots of people also, because we do have questions that we won't be able to answer. For those that sent questions and we didn't manage to answer, I will ask the speakers, the panelists, to answer them, and then we can send later by email as a follow-up from the session. And now I will send back to Olivia to our wrap up. And yeah, thanks again, Tara, Valentina, and Hassel, and Olivia.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Super interesting. And there's so much going on in the world. I need to have a look at all the pages you've suggested in the reports. So if you also would like to be such an inspiring person and do inspiring work and show it to us, please contact us and be a speaker. So you can talk about whatever you like. You can talk 5 minutes, you can present whatever you want. We're just glad to have some speakers up here. So please feel free and contact us if you're interested. We're always looking for speakers. All right. So with that, we are already coming to the end. Thank you again to the panelists. It was amazing to hear from you, and also to everyone who came and who stayed here during those COVID times. Really much appreciated. And now, as promised, I guess we have the special wheel part.
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll just share the screen. You will be able to see, I already put all the names of everyone who wanted to participate. So now it's just a matter of spinning it. So here we go. And the winner is Lisa. Congratulations. I believe.
Thank you. How fun. I need it.
Well, enjoy it then. We'll be in touch on sharing the details.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Back to you, Olivia, then.
All right, so we have the winner. So I think that was already it. We are at the end. I hope, or we all hope, you will be healthy in the future. You stay tuned for some other Data Plus Women talks. And now you have the time to dig into the data even more. So stay healthy, and yeah, thank you for coming, and thank you to the amazing panelists.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye. Thank you.
Bye.